Hello everybody, welcome back to Feldy, Farmer Yip's beautiful masterpiece for Farming Simulator 11. Oh, we're still over 100 episodes. That's what happens when you go past 100. And kind of winding down maybe to the end of the series that we'll have on this wonderful map. And you know, I'm just doing what we normally do, getting fields cultivated and everything following harvest. And we have harvested potatoes out of 3 of these fields. We have also spread some muck. We can kind of see it here. Something that Farmer Yip built into the map, but he never really advertised it, and it wasn't quite activated. So last episode, or maybe the one before, we kind of talked about a mod to activate that. Otherwise, I figured we'd get this fella going. Here, let me see if he can remember the course. So while we were... Oh, that doesn't help. Let me try that again. I got something to help him remember. Make sure he isn't going to tear anything up. Alright, field detection is on. So while he's doing this, we will wend our way out to the harvest field. And we're over on the island. Matter of fact, we were testing out kind of a new hillside combine, which we have here. This little guy, actually we just filled him up, so you know, I probably should empty him and get it out of the way. I wasn't thinking I would like this combine, but I kind of do. You know, it had some great animation. All these belts on the side are animated, so that's kind of cool that you have all that in there. Even the straw walkers in the back, you can't even hardly see them probably under there, also are animated. Nice touch. And you know, we need to empty this thing out. Where did I put the trailer? Maybe it's number 3. There we go. We kind of cut around here, coming across. And this, I was trying out a couple different hillside combines because, you know, as I have mentioned many times, probably sounds like a bellyache. We have such steep hills on here. You look at the steepness of the hill, and really to harvest it properly you would need some hillside harvesting equipment. So we are trying that out, and this was one of the options. Not sure what the make model is, CP12 or something I have in mind. We can maybe look at it here in a moment, but I like the combine. And I think maybe with a little work, let me see if I can get this up here, I can maybe do some things to it that I did to the other combine that we're going to try here in a moment, the auto leveling Quattro, or, I forget what that thing was. Good grief, I'm terrible with names. I just want a hillside combine. Alright, so we emptied this fellow. Let me move this kind of out of the way, and I'll go temporarily relocate our machine. Kind of get a touch of nostalgia with this one, as it sounds kind of like the combine we had in Farm Sim 09, kind of the one that came with the game. You'll notice, yeah, this is just a little floppy, kind of how it was put together, the components, and I'll maybe show a little bit more what that means here in a moment. I have room to, got a little bit of room maybe. I just want to get it out of the other combine's way. It's probably as much as I, oh yes, I don't want to go down in there. Let me get off of the brink. Alright, that's probably enough room. Oh, nope, don't want to go there. Gonna go back to the island. Alright. Oh, we're getting a bunch of smoke coming off of the barge. That's one other thing I need to figure out how to fix. I just don't know how to fix that. It's sending the particle animation clear across the map, shooting into the hill. Go figure. Now, this combine is set up different, and I want to show what I did to this one. You know, the other combine we just saw up there on the hill, I didn't do anything with. And you maybe notice, as I turn the camera here, it's kind of a little jittery. I have a whopping 14 frames per second, it's telling me. So there is something about this particular mod that is particularly expensive in terms of the machine's resources. But I'll explain a little bit more what I did to it. I think it's on already, yeah, as we do this here. So get this up the hill. And this one, I figured, if I can get it up the hill, that is, it's maybe, I don't know if my header's a little wide. I'll be careful. See if I can just gently get it up the hill. It's kind of a little excited, I think, on the uptake here. Alright, get up the hill. Before I do any talking, get up where it's smooth. Alright, so we will take him out kind of where the other went, and maybe, you know, one of the things I did to this is I installed autopilot. So when I open this up, of course, we're going to have an option here to set it up for our header. And let me make sure those arrows are approximately where they need to be. And you know, I don't even know if I have tested this yet, so we will see firsthand if it cooperates. All right, let's crank her up. Kind of come into the crop here and turn it loose. All right, it's doing its thing. Always cracks me up watching. Oh, okay. Let me try to narrow that a little bit. See if it won't pick up quite as much. Alright, that looks kind of weird, seeing the back tires do that, but that's kind of a function of autopilot. And it's flat right here, so we're not really going to notice much in the way of leveling. It's going to turn here, but you'll start to see it leveling, I think, as we get out kind of and start coming around this hill. There you see some leveling happen. And this one here is set up totally different from the other one. It used to be set up the same, kind of as the other one. Kind of floppy component parts. It kind of leveled, but it just wasn't consistent. And what you'll notice now, in spite of some of the jockeying around it's doing, you know, with the autopilot, it is consistently leveling. It is staying, you know, with the contour of the hill, and it's forced to because I have a script in there telling it to. And so it looks more normal, if you will, and it's more stable. Now the trouble is it's expensive in terms of FPS. So, like I say, 14 FPS really isn't enough. Hopefully this isn't too much of a slideshow putting it into a video. But, you know, let me see, I don't even know if it's gonna make this particular corner. Yeah, it may just go straight ahead, so I may need to take over kind of as we get up the hill here just to get it to go across. Yeah, see, he was trying to wander. So let me get him turned around here, and we'll take a little step over this way. All right. There we go. Yeah, it's skipping some. I'm not sure why it's doing that with the autopilot, but it should be, and yes it is. It's doing a full level and it's being consistent. And again, I'll show kind of what I did to get it to do that here in a moment. So finally, I have a bona fide hillside combine in here that should work consistent Like I say, my only concern is it's too expensive for, in terms of resources, computing resources for the computer that I have. So I'm almost half fearful that at some point it'll kill the video because I'm demanding too much. Why aren't you getting up the hill, you silly? There, can you keep going? There we go. Keep going to the side. No, like it's looking too far up the hill. So I may need to fix some things, you know, on the header in terms of its work area, its cutting area, because it isn't quite taking a full swath. Here, let me just put the thing out of its misery. Jiminy. I think hopefully everybody got to see kind of picture of how it looks. Oh, there's lights. That's kind of a different view. Yeah, I wish autopilot would run a little smoother, but I'm generally pleased here at kind of how it's turned out. Let me get this up here. Man, that's a massive winger. Goes a little fast in the second setting. Here it's 7 miles an hour just on speed 1, so yeah, this should down in here it's doing some leveling. I don't know, I just think it looks cool. Not to mention it's really critical if you're harvesting on hills that you have, you know, the leveling capability so you can properly and adequately separate the crop. Yeah, it's definitely leveling there. Oh, the tractor stopped. Need to go out to the field. So, let me just pause it right here. Yeah, you can definitely see the leveling there. Now, where we don't have the leveling is up and down. This particular combine, as you can see here, there's hydraulic cylinders in the front and in the rear. And the front, well, all of them really, will level side to side, and going up or down a hill, it should also level on this other axis too. It's a 4-way leveling combine. I currently only have it working 2-way, which means it'll level on the hill, kind of like you see here, but that is all. And, you know, growing up, the farm that I worked on had a couple hillside machines, and here in the U.S., I don't think it's very common that you see a combine that will level 4 ways. There was one produced that I'm aware of, and I think it was an international, what was it, a 403 way back in the day that would level 4 ways, but it was the only one, and I can't remember what years it was produced, maybe 60s-ish. And all the other ones, they only tend to level side to side. And you know, if a farmer is creative in how they cut a hill, they don't have to go up and down it. There's plenty of space. You know, you can come out here and kind of take a broad sweeping turn. Of course, you always got to contend, you know, on the other side, turning around. But suffice it to say, most of what we have here in the U.S. just levels side to side. So that's kind of what I have here. I would have made it, it would have been just as easy to do it end to end, but at least once I got it working. And that was kind of a trip in its own right. But the reason I didn't has to do with something I'll show you in a moment. Has to do with where the pivot point was, and I was just afraid that it would look too strange leveling because, yeah, the pivot point wasn't on the cylinders like up front or back here. It was somewhere in the middle. So you could tilt it just no problem, but it would just look screwy and not anything how it would appear in real life. Whereas what I just did, you know, with the side to side, it works fine. I'm gonna save this here. I'm gonna hop out of the game and show you just a little bit in terms of what I did. So if you want to do the same thing on a combine that you have that should be hillside, that you can. So back in a moment. Alright, we're back here. I have loaded up in the Giants editor this particular combine. It's called an auto leveling Quattro. It says Lexian here, which I believe is a Kloss combine. And so someone must have used parts from a Lexian. I really don't know. Or maybe it is a Lexian. Or maybe Quattro is somehow tied in there. And I take it it's probably a European combine and that I know nothing of. I happened to find it on the internet, and I really don't know anything about it, except it is a hillside combine. So some of what I was talking about earlier about components is in a model, a component to hold it together is all these things that come clear over to the edge of the scenograph. So it's going to be the main body, which is all this up here, and then they have some on the front axle, rear axle. So this will be front, this one is the rear. This one here has some parts in the middle, I believe. I just made it visible, maybe some of that. I'm not real sure from a modding perspective as to when something is set out as a separate component versus not. What I do know is that if you want this to work in-game, you're going to need some XML coding to hold all the components together. You know, if the combine body surges ahead when you move it, but the wheels stay back there because they're not connected, well, of course, that wouldn't look right. So in the XML, there is a section that you probably have seen many times called components, and it has each of them listed as to how they're to behave. And honestly, I have no idea what solver iteration count or all that means. But I think the point of some of this in here, the joints, are to indicate the points where each of these components connect to each other and how they're held together. So that's just kind of this. And then some of the other combines that were made to be hillside had, I think it was in the rotations, the rotation limit. Remember I said it was a little floppy? And that's because they made it floppy by putting in rotation limits. And I took those and I set them to 0 because I want all the parts to stay rigidly together, except for the one that I tell by Lua code that I wanted to tilt, along with the topography of the ground. So I turned all the rotation limits to 0. As you can see, here's what they were before. This one's on the Z-axis, X-axis for the various components and their joints. So what I did to this combine, there's a number of things I can't hardly remember. But the main thing I wanted was the main body to tilt. And at first, I tried to tilt clear out here the main component. And eventually I learned I can't do it. I don't know why, but I couldn't do it. It had to be something inside of this, because I think some of the... I can't even explain it because, and I don't know why. But suffice it to say, I had to have the full body, that is going to be tiltable in another group in here. Now you'll see we got all sorts of items right underneath it, and then we have one here called body. And everything you see here is in the body, and this is what is going to tilt. Maybe just to show side to side, it's going to tilt depending on the topography just to stay level, right? Well, there's a lot of parts that were not inside the body. So I had to put all of the parts in there, and then to make sure I didn't screw up the indexing, this is all the visible parts, that is, I had to turn off the visibility of the parts wherever else they appeared. So, for example, here's a flap lid. Well, maybe that's probably nothing. I don't know if there's anything in there, or it's far enough inside. Yeah, see, this part is invisible. So I didn't have to do anything with that part. That's a poor example. Maybe cooler mesh. Yeah, that one is off. So that is here. Well, you already see one there, but it's a copy. Here's the original. But when you have the body tilting, here's what would happen. You see that part is just kind of sitting out there? So I needed the part to be in the body so that when it tilted, it would go with it. So what I did with a lot of these parts that I moved is I copied it, I put it inside the body scenograph, and then I took the original and made it invisible. Now, maybe what I should also do is make sure it's non-renderable. I think I'm okay. But yeah, like I said, there's something very costly about this particular model, and maybe it's the textures, maybe it's some of the movements that I did in here of things. All I know is FPS goes down for the mod, so I probably need to figure out something, just to make it a little bit easier to run in game. But there were all sorts of parts, including, these lights here, everything. There was a whole bunch of things I added to the main body so that it would work properly, turned it off elsewhere. And the reason I left the original part exactly where it was and didn't remove it is because of the indexing. You'll remember that in the XML file, there's all these indices saying rotate this part, rotate that part, and some of the things I wasn't going to move. So I didn't want to remove it because when you peel it out of here, delete it, you change a whole bunch of indices. And if there is something in the XML, now it isn't going to work, because you removed it and it's on a different part. And then the other thing is if there was moving parts that were part of the body, now I had to figure out the new index to plug in over here for each one of those parts. It was a royal pain in the neck, but eventually did it. And so that's one of the things I did was just move it all into body so I have something clean to move, because this is going to be a node that I identify in the script that I want to tilt. Another thing I did, and this is kind of just a creative license that I took, is the axle. I widened the axle. I just changed the scale a little bit and I moved these tires out both front and back. A lot of times a hillside combine, in order to bend like it does in the field, if the axle or the wheels are close together, it's going to rub on the tires. So you don't want that to happen in real life. So a lot of times, a hillside machine will have a wider axle. And this combine here, I have no idea if it was made to scale, no idea at all. So in order to get it to have some of the movement that I wanted, I went ahead and I widened the tire axle a bit and moved the tires out. I don't know how much, maybe half a meter, just to give it a little bit more play. Maybe not even something anybody notices in particular. So that's kind of what I did in the model itself in here. And then I set up something for XML. And I just jammed it right here. Hopefully you can see it. It says auto level. And then I put the index. And I know I've mentioned it here before. I've had terrible trouble with indices. If you come over to this combine, you will see body says index 025. I don't know what is wrong with my computer, but the only way I can get it to work is if I call it index 24. There is something royally screwed up and it's made it very confusing. So please don't do it the way I did it. On yours, you probably need to properly identify the exact index. I wish I could do that, but I can't. Anyway, that's the index of what I want to move. Then I have a left and a right marker. Now these are 0, 0, and 0, 1. They are, let me see, up here, 0, 0. I don't know why there is a start index width or whatever. That is typically set up by the header. So there's no use for these up here. So I figured I would just use them. Start. I put it on the left tire. So 0, 0 is going to be the left. It's right at the bottom of the tire, kind of where it touches the ground. Width is over here on the right tire. So that's right where it touches the ground. And I'm going to use those 2 points to help the combine know what level is. If you're at a terrific angle, it's going to know it needs to bend according to it in order to keep it level on the topography. So those are my 2 reference points, and I have them referenced here in the XML. I also had ones in here for front and back, but kind of like I explained earlier, we're not going to use it. Oh yeah, I was going to show why. And let me just go to the body again. You'll notice the pivot point for the model is right in the middle. So let me show what happens when I tilt it up or down. So you have that, and it's just coming way off the front axis. And usually, I mean, it doesn't level that much that direction anyhow in real life. The really bad one is this one here, where the back end can go up quite a bit. Maybe even that far. I've seen some that are pretty far up in the air. Well, you see kind of how this looks. And I know there's a way probably to fix that, but you got to take the whole thing into Blender to move, I think, this particular point. In later versions of the Giants editor, there were ways to move your reference point here without having to go to Blender, but we don't have that ability here. At least I'm not. Maybe someone will comment, put something in the comments that says how to do it. But that's the reason I chose not to level fore and aft. It just looks too screwy, but I could get away with doing it side to side. That definitely works. Okay, so even though I have references in here, that could work on another one. There also needs to be something in their maximum side rotation. If the machines always have a maximum, the John Deere 6602 that I operated on Lone Oak Farms had a maximum right and left tilt of 44%. That was the grade of a hill that it could handle, was 44%. So I figured I would put something in here to max it out as to how far it would be allowed to tilt. Because if you don't, you could in theory take it off a cliff, and by George, your combine is going to tilt straight up and it's just going to look totally weird. So I tried to put some maximum in there, and ditto with front and back. So these are kind of the markers that I put in the XML, and then of course there already was a Lua, several Lua files for this one. Actually, that might be why some of it's resource demanding too. So the first thing I had to do is actually very simple, is all the things that I put in the XML file over here need to be called up in the script. So that's kind of what's going here. Here's the leveling node and the right and the left marker. It's just looking for it over in the script, by taking the name that I gave it, the index, left, right. These are all tags. There's the index, left, right, that I put over here. And it's a utils index to object, which is going to connect these points and this index to the root node of the mod. So it knows these points are connected to the mod and will move with it. And then I got the level max side rotation, pulling that also out of the XML. So once you have that stuff in here, then down here you can do something with it. I chose to put it in update tick, which isn't quite as resource demanding as update, because it doesn't call the game every frame. Tried to make it so that you had to be sitting in it for it to do its thing, and needed to, obviously be entered, ready for input. And then it's just grabbing a few details. Get the terrain, and remember the left and the right points? It's at figure out where you are on the map. That's these points. Then it's as left and right, get the terrain height at that point. But limit it to the actual height of the wheel. Sometimes what can happen is if you're driving on a road and you never know what's under the road, the mapper may have a deep ravine under a road that he forgot to fill in, And if you're looking only at terrain height, your combine's going to do screwy things because it's going to tilt based on the terrain when you want it to just be right where the tire is. So that's kind of why I have that there. So you're getting a point, how high this is, left Y, right Y. Left-right distance is a distance between the tires. I did have a vector calculation here to figure that out. It probably would work. I was having trouble with it for a while, so I chose to hard code it here. This is a poor way to do it. This would be a better way, but anyway, this will work for this particular combine. It's 4.5 meters across. That's the distance between the tires here. So it knows the height from one end of this to the other. So you start forming a right triangle situation because you know the distance between the tires. You know the distance between the left point and the right point in terms of how high they are. And then you do some trigonometry, the good old a squared plus b squared equals c squared, to get your differences. And your angles, we're using an arctangent here to get the angle between the two. And this then is determining the rotation angle, I think in radians, so that the code knows how to tilt it. So we do all these calculations and then we come down here and we set rotation. We're not changing the x-axis rotation. We're not changing the y. We are changing the z. And that may be counterintuitive as to, here we'll say, well, it's side to side. Is that really the z-axis? So let me just go in here, and what you'll see is the body, this blue arrow, I believe, is the z-axis. So it's going to rotate on the blue axis, and you'll notice when we tilt it, you see over here and rotate z, it's putting the rotate there. So that, of course, is the axis that we impact with the Lua code. That is all it is. I got a whole bunch of other garbage in here because I threw everything in the kitchen sink at this, trying to figure out how to get this combine to properly auto level. So there's a whole bunch of gobbledygook in here I got to take out, but really the code that's doing this is very simple. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 lines of code here that is the engine of making it do what it does. And then it just 4 more lines up here dragging in the details, from the XML file and the model itself. I'm really pleased with kind of how it turned out. And anyways, I just wanted to show the ad in case someone else wanted to give it a try. You got a little bit of Lua coding to give it. And I just borrowed, I don't know what this other script does. So I'm just coming in right over the top of whatever it's doing and borrowing it. So if you do this in a separate Lua script, you need to make sure you have, the prerequisites present would be true. You'd need the load to put this in. You would need a delete, even though it would be empty. Mouse event would be empty. Key event would. I think you do need an update. That would all be empty too. No code in there. A draw. No code in there. So, you could set it up pretty simple in terms of putting it in the mod itself. So I just borrowed someone else's. Anyway, hopefully that was of interest to someone. We're still farming in Feldy, and there's just a handful of things left that we'll do before we close out the series. Thank you for coming along. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.